In May of 1787, delegates from every state except Rhode Island traveled to Philadelphia, to the old Pennsylvania State House, where the Declaration of Independence had been signed. This time, they came to participate in an extremely important meeting called the Constitutional Convention. Its purpose was to write a constitution for the United States, a document that would serve as the framework for a new national government. With George Washington in charge, 55 men were sworn to secrecy, and then they went to work. Here in this room, all summer long, the framers of the Constitution debated, discussed, argued, and compromised. And by mid-September, they were done.
On the fourth day, a plan was presented to the convention. Governor Edmund Randolph of Virginia made the presentation, but it was really the work of James Madison. It was called the Virginia Plan.
The Virginia Plan called for the government to be divided into 3 departments or branches. The legislative branch, which would enact the laws, the executive branch, which would see that the laws were carried out, and the judicial branch, which would see that justice was done under the law. The separation of powers was very important. We had to guard against the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, in the hands of one person, or a few people, or even a group. It doesn't matter if the powerful are elected, self-appointed, or born to their office. If the powers aren't separated, the result is tyranny.
Once Madison's plan was put on the table, Alexander Hamilton addressed the real issue.
I questioned the very idea of a confederation, that loose association of very independent states. I saw in Madison's plan a strong central government, a true national government.
Others agreed with Madison and Hamilton. After some debate, a resolution on the Virginia Plan was passed.
A national government ought to be established consisting of a supreme legislative, executive, and judiciary.
The delegates had taken a bold step. Now, instead of just revising the Articles of Confederation, they were creating a constitution for a new kind of government. The convention went on to debate specific issues. Once it was decided that the government would be made up of 3 separate branches, the delegates went on to work out the details of the Constitution. There were many issues to be decided. One of the most important and difficult issues was the makeup of the legislative branch, Congress. The problem was that the small states were afraid they would be overpowered by the large states. They wanted all states to be equal and have the same number of votes in Congress. The large states said they should have more votes because they had more people. The Virginia Plan called for 2 houses. In both houses, representation would be based on population. So a large state like Virginia would have many more votes than a small state like Delaware. William Patterson of New Jersey offered another plan. The New Jersey Plan. It called for a Congress of only 1 house. Each state would send the same number of representatives to it, no matter what the population. The convention debated and debated the issue. Some of the delegates even threatened to leave Philadelphia. Then came a compromise. In fact, it was called the Great Compromise. It was offered by Roger Sherman of Connecticut.
It was clear that the entire convention might break up over the disagreements between the large states and the smaller states. So Roger Sherman offered this compromise, that the Congress, the legislative branch, be made up of 2 houses. Representation in one house would be based on population, so the people would have a greater representation. In the other house, every state would have the same number of representatives, so the small states would have an equal voice to the large states.
That settled that issue. But there was another question that divided the convention. How would the representatives to Congress be selected?
The Great Compromise also addressed the issue of who would elect the members of Congress. Now, some of the delegates wanted the people to elect their representatives. Others thought it was best left to the state governments. Roger Sherman proposed this compromise. Have the people elect the members of the House of Representatives directly, and have the state governments select the senators.
Roger Sherman's compromise was accepted. So when the Constitution was sent to the state to be approved or ratified, this is how the legislative branch looked. The Congress would be made up of 2 houses. The House of Representatives, where the number of representatives would be based on the state's population, and the Senate, where each state would have the same number of senators, 2. The people would elect the members of the House of Representatives directly, and the state governments would select the senators. Of course, that's not exactly the system we have today. Now senators, just like representatives, are elected directly by the people.
We have finally reached a compromise about the slaves and if they will count for population. We decided on the 3/5 compromise. It means that a slave counts as 3/5 of a person, so it will be fair to us and the South.
The South wanted the slaves to count as a person per population. It would give them more power in the legislative branch. The more population you have, the more representatives you have. States like Rhode Island do not like this, and states like New York like it.
We do not want the slaves to count as a person in population. It is not fair to us because we do not have slaves and the South does. If they get to count their slaves, we will become less powerful. We want the slaves to count as 0.
Both came to an agreement of the 3/5 compromise, and it is fair to both North and South. We both did not get what we wanted, but we agreed on something that was fair.